Thank you. Good evening. It's Tuesday, April 20th. This is the special meeting of the Finance Committee. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, of course. Vice Mayor Burt.
Here.
Chair Cormack.
Here.
Councilmember Filseth.
Here.
3 present.
Thank you so much. Now we'll move to oral communications, where members of the public may address us on any subject within our purview that is not on the agenda this evening. And the clerk will assist you.
Yes, if anyone would like to speak on anything that is not on the agenda tonight, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or press *9. And we have one public speaker, Stephen Rainey. Stephen, you'll have 2 minutes for public comment. Let's see if you can unmute yourself. We will begin. Mr. Stephen Rainey.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Canadian Finance Committee and staff, Steve Rainey from Palo Alto TMA. Just calling your attention to an email sent a couple hours ago. We've created a forecast for the most likely scenario, looking at commute traffic levels and lunchtime retail foot traffic levels relative to 2019. We access some interesting data sources, so we aspire to compare notes and sources and conclusions with others interested in this topic. And obviously we need to align with the economic assumptions underlying the city's economic forecast. So please take a look at that. And also the second item in the email is, can and should the city provide a tracking dashboard to track the economic recovery? So indicators might be the clipboard counts that are going on in downtown and Cal Ave, parking garage counts, if you have access to monthly tax receipts. The TMA's metric is cars removed, which is pretty good, and maybe parking permit revenue and maybe some other indicators. So thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. And Chair Cormack, we have no other speakers at this time.
Thank you to the clerk and thank you to our speaker this evening. We'll move on to action item 1, which is a recommendation from staff in the UAC that we recommend the City Council decline to adopt the energy storage system targets and receive the 2020 energy storage report. Would staff like to provide a presentation?
Yes, good evening, Chair Cormack, council members. We do have a presentation tonight to talk a little bit more about this recommendation that the UAC and staff is making to you tonight. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Senior Resource Planner Lena Perkins to walk us through the presentation.
Hi there. It's a pleasure to speak with you this evening, and I'll be presenting the energy storage report. So I will go to sharing my screen. Right. So I'm going to change the view here. All right. Good evening, commissioners. I'm speaking to you tonight about the energy storage report for 2020, which we submitted to the CEC in December of 2020. We are presenting to you now, and we will also be presenting your recommendation and our recommendation to the City Council. So this is the outline of the report. Why are people interested in storage? What are the key takeaways from the 2 analyses that we did? What next? And a recommended Finance Committee motion. So first of all, why storage? Why are people interested? First, battery costs. Battery installations are surging and the costs are decreasing commensurately. And then when you look at highly renewable systems such as the Cal ISO, you have the opportunity to lower carbon emissions. CPAU is required to investigate energy storage to see if it is cost effective every 5 years. CPAU did not set energy storage targets in 2011, 2014, or 2017, finding them not to be cost effective at the time. We undertook a detailed analysis, both internally and with the Smart Electric Power Alliance, to investigate whether our rate structure and cost structure for the wholesale market made and updated energy storage prices had changed the equation to see if energy storage was cost effective for the community as a whole at this point, and neither analysis showed it to be cost effective. Therefore, we did not set energy storage targets in 2020, but we will continue to look for opportunities and align incentives. So, broadly speaking, we want to store renewable electricity with storage. We want to leverage distributed batteries for society, for reliability and resiliency and customer engagement. And we also want to improve resiliency in catastrophic events. And these are sort of three different goals. And to some extent, batteries and other forms of storage can address multiple goals here, but often they can't address them at the same time. So, what we have found thus far for our system and for the wholesale system overall is that curtailment is less costly than installing the current generation of energy storage that is out there. And so the market is choosing to curtail renewable resources more than installing battery storage, although there is more coming online. And part of that is because the carbon price currently in California is too low to adequately compensate for that energy storage. And the other part is that, batteries degrade and they are still very expensive relative to other options. For leveraging distributed batteries in society, essentially the use cases compete, and our rate structure and the incentives for our customer versus us with the wholesale electric market for different customer classes, they're not aligned yet. And we are working on that, and we can talk about that more in detail. And then as far as resiliency goes, absolutely could be relevant in particular locations where there's a very high value for resiliency. Staff is already examined several potential sites, and the costs for batteries or other energy storage has been much higher than essentially than hardening the distribution lines in that area. So this is just to interpret the models, and feel free to stop me anytime if you want to interject. But in terms of interpreting the models results, this is for the residential case. And, I'll say that the highlights for the residential case in my mind are that the residential application where battery is added to an existing solar system they do save carbon, because a residential load profile is largely in the evening and the morning hours. And so that would allow batteries to be used in those higher carbon hours. So storing the solar in the middle of the day and using it in the evening, say. The other aspect here is that, they are saving the utility some money, but not enough money in the wholesale cost market to, offset the costs, whether these costs are borne by the customer or by the utility. There's not enough benefit here for the cost. And we can talk about what the community would like to set as that value of resiliency. And this would be for a residential customer, right? So it may only benefit that particular customer. And that this is not actually a lot of carbon savings here. We applied a very high, we applied a $70, $75 per metric ton of carbon price here, and it's still, was not it's not much carbon savings because, again, of the parasitic losses from using the battery and not exporting that to the grid. In terms of the commercial battery, I'd say that the highlights here are that from a commercial customer perspective, because of the relatively high demand charges in Palo Alto currently, a commercial customer could go out and install a battery and the commercial customer would save money. The problem is that this actually increases carbon emissions overall because a commercial customer, large commercial customer's load profile is actually fairly well matched to solar and peaking in the middle of the day, and where they are incented by our demand charge structure is to actually discharge their battery in the middle of the day to shave their peak. And so then the battery is charging during the higher carbon hours. We looked at a couple of other scenarios of solar plus storage. And I think the other thing to look at is in the far right-hand graph, that if we were to restrict the hours between 4 and 10 p.m. for when these batteries must be discharged, it really lowers the benefit to the commercial customers, almost by 40%. So this is a positive benefit to the commercial customers. And so that's something where if we need to understand that and, potentially think about other mechanisms to compensate them if that's worth it to us. And again, the savings that we would get from these commercial customers are just not commensurate with the cost of the storage. But we can investigate this with time of use, which is coming with our smart meters. So next steps, the recommendation from the Finance Committee, present the recommendations to Council, investigate more specific cases for resiliency, especially location specific. And we will actually be looking at a resiliency study this summer, working with Office of Emergency Services and a Stanford fellow, working to align our incentives as storage prices decrease in particular. And sorry, I have a printer going here, just a minute. And then consider a pilot of smart electric heat pumps and smart charging for EVs. So this is the recommended motion, and I would be happy to take your questions.
Thanks so much, Dr. Perkins. Why don't we start with the public? It looks like some component of the public is staff, but we'll let the clerk see if anyone would like to.
Yes, of course. If anyone from the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or press *9. And Chair Cormack, we have no speakers.
Yes, but I see that the city manager has raised his hand. So why don't we start with him before we turn to members of the committee?
I don't know how that happened. My mistake. Did not intend to ask a question, so I'll pass.
All righty, then you can go back on video. I thought it was odd that there was something we must have missed. All righty.
And I might just add just one point, that we still, council and the community still have, have discretion to implement battery storage pilots or programs or incentives to whatever extent they see fit and to whatever extent it is valued by the community. But we did not set energy storage targets here in order to not be obligated and tie our hands, since they were not found to be cost effective broadly.
Thanks for that clarification. Councilmember Philseth.
Yeah, thanks very much to staff for this and for looking at this. I know there's not a simple single answer to this question, but as you look at this, what's your assessment of sort of what the realistic cost at this moment is for per kilowatt hour for storage in practice?
Yeah, well, there's the cost per kilowatt hour, and then there's the installed cost. And the cost per kilowatt hour is going down, but the installed cost isn't. The installation cost, the soft costs are actually going up, especially in Palo Alto. So so I think they may be sort of offsetting each other. I think, what is it? The Tesla Powerwall is 13.5 kilowatt hours, and it's close to $10,000, $7,000 to $10,000. Just for the battery. And so, say, so I guess that makes it, say it's installed costs plus another 40%. I have to go into it because we have different assumptions in here, but, and again, my arithmetic fails me, but say it's $15,000 installed and it's 13.5 kilowatt hours. So
Right.
I think that's $1,000 per kilowatt hour.
But you didn't go and look and say, okay, well, the liquid salt guys are around here, and some other guys are around there, and so forth. You guys didn't go do that.
We didn't. We did a current assessment of available technologies, because we set this we investigate it every 3 years. So we need to have some progress to have it installed in the next 3 years if we set it as a goal, because it's serious. We're setting it for the CEC, and we should only be setting it if we think it's cost effective, because otherwise, yeah. And we could put some assumptions in there for the community value of resiliency. Not so much reliability, because that's more on the distribution system, but for resiliency, there could be a community value for resiliency, and that could pull things around, but those are very, very broad ranges.
All right, thank you very much.
Vice Mayor Burt.
Yeah, thanks. So first, can you speak a little bit more on how AB 2514 would tie our hands or obligate us if we set a target?
Well, the framing is very similar to energy efficiency targets. So we are, we are setting goals because we think they're achievable and cost effective for the community overall. So, tying our hands, isn't maybe the best turn of phrase, but perhaps making a promise that we don't know how we're going to keep. Whereas we have discretion to do this if the community wants it. I think storage is very interesting. There has not, in the loading order of all the different work going on in the utility, it hasn't risen to the top yet.
But so if we set a target that we think is, we have reach codes, if we set either a modest target or a more aggressive target, how does that obligate us, other than that we've said we're aiming for this and we're going to attempt to achieve it? Is there any legal obligation?
No, I think it's an optics obligation. It could invite, quite a bit of, could invite some conversations with the CEC in terms of if we don't, meet that target. And they do use some of these projections for their planning, their supply and capacity planning. So it's meant for firmer estimates.
Okay, so because it's used for their planning, they want it to be not just an aspirational goal. On the other hand, we set a lot of different goals in our programs, in different reach codes, in our renewables acquisitions, which we've achieved, and various things. So I'm still trying to understand how material different this is from other goals that we set. And maybe the most material thing is you're saying that the CEC places some reliability on the goals that individual utilities have set, that they plan for achievement of those goals to some degree. Is that the principal difference?
To some degree, I mean, it'll be wrapped into our integrated resources planning along with our efficiency targets, which are not meant to be aspirational. And we've actually, with load declines, we've come pretty close to the efficiency targets, but I don't think there's a huge difference there. But I would say that the direction from the previous direction from the UAC and staff has been, if this isn't benefiting customers overall, how much resources do we want to privilege to energy storage versus something else?
Well, that's where I want to go into.
I think that's part of what we're facing here, is that there are sort of two things that happen once we start setting these goals. First off, we have the California Energy Commission doesn't, it very lightly regulates us. You, as the council members, are our regulatory authority, and it's important to us to maintain that sense of local control. And part of the way we do that is by aligning ourselves with the sort of practices of the state as much as possible. And so if we set this target, again, the CEC starts to count on this in their projections, and there's an expectation that we're going to follow through on this regardless of the cost. And so the impact ends up being money. And these are resources that get devoted to energy storage in the amount of that target that we set, regardless of whether we are weighing them against other options. And typically you would do that because energy storage is a cost-effective way to achieve certain utility goals. Again, we're talking about setting specific utility goals here. If, on the other hand, we maintain that flexibility and do not set targets, the CEC is not counting on us to set those goals for utility purposes. But if we have other community purposes that we're trying to achieve, even if it's not cost effective for the utility, we can make judgment calls about how many resources we want to devote to energy storage versus, say, electrification or other SCAP goals. And we can sort of consider them all in the same, we can consider them all next to each other as opposed to privileging this one use.
Got it. And so I'll have my next question is kind of related to how that context compares to, for instance, when we first set renewable energy goals of 20%, and the state had no renewable energy goal. And we didn't set it in a way that obligated us to achieve that 20% within a narrow time frame. And it gave us latitude within the framework that we set up. And in having done that, it really, having done it in that way, it allowed us to be opportunistic. We set a budgetary framework. And one of the main reasons that we have such exceptionally low electric utility rates despite having 100% carbon neutral electricity is because we were ahead of the state. We set a framework, we acted opportunistically, and as a result, we bought when renewables were cheaper and the IOCs bought when they were more expensive. Same thing happened when we upped it to 33% and the state had not adopted such a mandate. So we came in and bought when there was a dip in the demand. And that's worked out really well for our utility. So I'm not saying that determines what we want to do here, but it colors this discussion. And you know, I think about some of the things that have even happened since December, or some of what's happened over last year with the state brownouts and the prospect for more of that, both from fires and heat, and that's becoming a more regular event. We hope it won't continue at its current rate. Oh, and I'd be curious on your thoughts on the likelihood of statewide brownouts potentially recurring, whether from mega fires or heat or other reasons, demand changes. And then the other two things that have happened locally have been since December is we've had our own regional mega fires, which could have a more focused impact on reliability. And then we've had our recent own internal reliability issues. So you spoke about kind of the difference between resiliency and reliability, or alluded to it. Can you speak a little bit more about how these? Oh, I'm sorry. And the other thing that has occurred is what we did last night, which is put a more concrete set of objectives on our climate action plan. And so those are changing circumstances even since this went to the UAC in December. So could you talk about any impact of those changing circumstances, as well as the dynamics between resiliency and reliability as it affects this discussion?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I'm glad you raised those points, and I tried to jot most of them down. I'll speak to some of them and then I may differ. So in terms of I'll take the last one first, because I think it can color our discussion. In terms of making a more concrete plan, I would absolutely encourage that. And I think that's part of what we'll be investigating, mostly from a resiliency perspective this summer. And I think that can be decoupled from this CEC submission, so that we maintain total autonomy and control over the price, the pace, everything. And that can be community driven. And we have a lot of techophiles on staff. So it's not, it'll be a popular project as long as it's in the right priority with everything else. So that, so I would just say that kind of broadly, and then I'll speak to the brownouts, the rotating outages from the CalISO supply, it's mostly reserve shortage that happened in the summer and fall. And although there were several stage 3 emergencies, there was only one rotating outage where we were called upon to drop load. And so as of yet, we can call that a 1 in 20 year event. And I think, and I have some insights into, the likelihood and some of the mitigating actions that the ISO has put into place. The ISO has done a number of actions, and I can follow up, with you or with the committee at large and discuss those. They're incremental, but some of the large ones are they're bringing on another 1.5 gigs of battery storage. They kept, I have to look up the exact numbers, but they kept 2 important natural gas plants from going out of business with the reliability must run contracts. And they revised their import assumptions down. So in the case of another, basically the entire West had a heat wave at the same time. And the California ISO does not have a contractual relationship for those imports aside from the day ahead bidding process. And so the imports didn't show up. They've made some other revisions with respect to not exporting during those times. And actually one of the very positive developments is that our resource for Western and the other members of Bank, along with LADWP, are now in the Western EIM. And they come with transmission and they do supply stack planning that is more than 48 hours in advance. You're on mute, Bert. So in terms of likelihood, I think absent a catastrophic wildfire situation or a entire West heat wave of commensurate scale and severity, we should be okay this year.
Good. That my muting was to shush a dog. So those are encouraging reasons why what occurred became a wake-up call with a bunch of corrective actions, and I hope that's what the state has done and the IOCs have done will be adequate. It's either a 1 in 20 event or a 1 in 1 event. So we aren't quite sure yet. Hopefully it was the big wake up and becomes a 1 in 1. So another question I have is the report talked about storage at our renewable PPA providers, and as we know, that's and the report mentioned that most new contracts, or many, if not most, are building in some form of storage at remarkably low costs. Do you have any numbers on the latest kind of best projects with storage built in? What are they coming in at?
I've looked through some of them, and I don't want to misquote off the top of my head, but they are not as, they are, since we have so much hydro that can serve the same purpose in terms of a load following resource, which we need, they are half the cost of a few years ago and still not nearly as cost effective as our hydro.
Oh, you mean the storage part?
The storage part.
Yeah. I just meant the whole PPA cost, because numbers I had seen, as we got down to when we hit a record, I think an international record of 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour without storage. It was phenomenal. And I've seen that the projects are fairly routinely below that with storage now.
And I would just say that there's some really good articles talking about the relative size of the storage to the generation, and the very cheap prices are for very small batteries on very big solar.
I appreciate that. There's a wide range in both amount of storage and form of storage, as Councilmember Philseth was talking about some of the other forms. And yeah, it's a whole spectrum in that, just a whole nother conversation there. But on the local level, I really appreciated your explanation on why the commercial just doesn't work out well for us on assisting in reliability or even the resiliency. But I wanted to, and then you address the residential element. But I'm not sure if I saw anything on whether a standalone storage at our own utility scale within our gates is something we've looked at, and whether that is a prospect, and that whether it could have any reliability component in addition to the resiliency.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And I think the key part that we are missing as staff is what is the value of that resiliency to the community? Because so you give us that as an input, we can tell you, how big, how much, if what kind, and that's, and that will be part, I suspect that could be part of what we look at this summer. And it's going to be more expensive than what we're seeing for PPAs, right? Double it, from PPAs at least, but it's here, right? It's not impacted by the wildfires. It's not impacted by the Cal ISO not keeping their house in order. And so, that has value. We just need a number from the community.
Well, and so I guess it's not going to be easy for us to punt that back to you, apparently, because how do we quantify the costs, both direct economic costs and other costs to the community of power outages, and if we have that would help mitigate either outages within the city or statewide state-induced brownouts, then it has that double benefit. But we're not going to be able. We might be able to get some sense of impact on businesses. We can't quantify what happens if somebody is relying on their electricity for a vital medical support. Other than maybe Molly can tell us what kind of liabilities we may face from loss of power on kind of a broad conceptual level. I mean, we can't really specify that.
The humanitarian cost and the ethical issues are absolutely there.
Yep. Yeah. And then there's just what's the value to our community and their kind of subjective costs of losing power for 4 hours or whatever. And conversely, a way that actually would be the way to quantify that, and maybe there's a way to do this inquiry, is if we frame the question in a survey that says, okay, we're paying 40% as homeowners, 40% below PG&E. And if you only were paying 30% below PG&E, but you would have this improvement in reliability, would you be willing to pay that difference? And that's kind of a way that we'd get some form of feedback on how is that subjective value quantified, then translates into, should we spend the dollars?
Yeah, and I think another indicator is, folks that are installing power walls at their home, if they're doing it for reliability reasons and not carbon or environmental reasons or economic reasons, then that's what it's worth to those residents. I think the tricky thing is socializing, if we're going to spread those costs to everyone and it's only going to benefit certain residents, I think that becomes tricky. I would also just say, and maybe I'll let Dean or Jonathan speak to this, but in all the analysis we have done so far, from a reliability standpoint, we are the distribution system operator, and you get more bang for your buck doing, more maintenance, upsizing lines than batteries, right? That is And Dean, maybe you can speak to that.
Yes, so as we talked about there, thank you, Lena. So part of that is that what we're concerned is if you put batteries, large battery portions, say, we'll just say in all the substations that we have, in the 9 substations, you know, it does help us in those cases that you were talking about, Vice Mayor Byrd, about, you know, large brownouts. PG&E decides that they want to shut down the entire system for whatever reasons. We would be able to then pick up the entire city for a period of time as those batteries are running. The problem with it is that is when you have those down wires or you have a bad piece of equipment or failure portion of it, that reliability and what you're hoping for those batteries are still not going to be able to serve those customers. Now, in this last case that we talked about of the 7,000 customers of loss of the substation, we would have been able to pick those customers up if we would have had some type of storage in that area. But
we would, you say?
we would have, because again, the isolation of that outage was at the substation itself. We would have been able to switch that around and pick it up from another substation. But isolation from what Lena's talking about in the distribution pieces, you know, we wouldn't be able to pick up all those customers at that period of time. So it goes back to what Lena's talking about is, you know, hardening the system, looking at what we need to do from the distribution, because we run that distribution side.
Right. And so it's not a panacea, but it could be an important component of the strengthening the reliability and resiliency. Okay. And Molly, I'm sorry. Lena,
can I just interrupt for a moment, Vice Mayor? I feel like we're spending a lot of time on this and potentially ranging a little farther afield. So are you?
Oh, no, I don't think it's far afield very much at all. I think this is an important discussion. And I don't have a lot of questions on the next item, a few on the final one, but this is an area that I want to probe and have a full discussion on. So no, I don't think it's far afield at all. So Molly, can you speak at all to any of that issue of our liability and how this might mitigate liabilities?
So I agree with Lena's comment that really the focus of the issue is really about ethics and policy more than law at this point. As a legal matter, the utility has what we call a no perfect power rule. So we do say to our customers, as any responsible utility would, that there is a possibility of outages, and that customers should take appropriate cautions to protect their own personal situation. Now, that said, we have seen in other contexts with catastrophic type of failures that utilities can in fact be held responsible for big and terrible things that can happen in the power arena. Okay. So I'm not suggesting there's no risk, but I think really the key is really more in terms of social and moral and ethical than legal at this point.
Yeah, I see throughout the report we have, references to extraordinary resiliency and cost effectiveness, but I think that's more in a narrow sense as opposed to some of these broader costs of that we might be able to mitigate. Let me ask two cost-related questions. One is, we're looking at this as a 3-year time frame each time we look at it. So for me, it's not necessarily the current cost, but the cost in 2024 that is maybe more relevant, or 2023 and 2024. And I think on lithium-ion batteries, we're seeing kind of industry-wide about a 10% per year reduction. Some of the other storage technologies may have different curves, and some are less clear. So when we've looked at cost effectiveness, it looked like in the report we were looking at 2021 costs. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Although the investment tax credit is decreasing, and that was baked in. And again, the cost of the battery itself is only about half the cost of the system, and the installation costs are actually increasing in our service
Well,
territory.
that's on the home installation, correct?
Well, both, because it's just nature of the current construction and interconnection. There's a lot of parts. So, even if my point is, even if the technology cost goes down 10% a year, we may be looking at 5% a year or less cost decreases, which are more than offset by the reduction in the investment tax credit. So the point is that it's a reasonable look 4 to 5 years out, but I hope technologies beat that projection.
So I thought that I'm aware of the what's been happening on the home storage, but I thought that the commercial scale, or even at our substation, that kind of smaller utility scale, wasn't experiencing those same cost changes.
So I shouldn't speak out of turn on the installation side at commercial or our substation level, but the investment tax credit decreasing substantially more than, I think, 10% each year is kind of enough to offset a 5% annual decrease in battery costs. So I share it as a point of curiosity, and I think this is probably a pretty realistic look, even 3 to 4 years out.
And then you had at the back of the report resource impacts, and talking about the pace of the projects that were outlined above. That's your additional studies, right? That you're planning on doing. And it's a half of a FTE and 100,000 a year. But if we wanted to really integrate this initiative within our SCAP objectives and the potential benefits to our reliability and resiliency, is that kind of a conservative staffing? And we really perhaps should consider something more than that if we wanted to really move forward?
Yeah, actually, that estimate is more just for a small pilot automatic demand response program. It's not for a battery incentive program. So it would need to be substantially more money and time than that. And if if we have a sense of the scale of what the community is looking for. And I think that's part of what we'll look for this summer in terms of mostly a resiliency angle, because I think most of our outages, and I can be corrected here, are not at substations. I think they are along the lines. And so, if we're looking at those, 1 in 20 year scenarios, which potentially could help in certain planned outage scenarios, possibly if they're in the right location at the right time. If we have a sense of what our resiliency wants and needs are, then we can price those out.
So given that we're going to be making recommendations to the council, if we were interested in not going forward with the AB 2514 commitment, but that we were interested, as you were describing earlier, of having an internal commitment that is not full blown yet, because it may not be ripe and we don't have all the information we need, but is still something that we view as important and want to accelerate. Maybe you can be thinking about, so as we wrap up this item, I'm interested in understanding what recommendation we might want to consider to the council to achieve that end. And I may have 1 or 2 follow-up questions. Oh, John, did you have something on that? I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to suggest, and I apologize for background noise this evening. What I might consider is considering, we have a whole list of potential programs and approaches that we're looking at in the context of the SCAP. And we do plan to look at resiliency storage this summer in the context of resiliency. It might make sense to consider storage among all of the other program approaches we're considering. I see the city manager is popping up, and I know there are considerations about staff time and limitations. And so I want to be cautious about that as well. City manager.
If I might just add to agree with Mr. Abenshine that tonight you're talking specifically about storage and potentially at the level as was just described of a pilot program. I do think, well, the utility has several pilot programs underway, so it may be a question, really a strategic question in terms of the sustainability planning, where to best leverage those resources, that investment, and ultimately the scalability within the context of that overall strategy.
But if we were to expand the resources, and I realize you can't do that with a flip of a switch, but if the commitment were to expand the resources and authorizing that and its rate impact, which would be pretty nominal at the outset, then you'd presumably be able to move more fully on the kind of the 6 key areas that the staff wanted to explore on pages 7 and 8, and you could move that forward moderately more aggressively. Is that correct?
I think that's certainly true, while also recognizing that irrespective of the, well, with consideration to specific programs, you would want those to be cost effective and also consistent with the priorities that the council establishes, either in the context of storage specifically or sustainability and resilience more broadly. So again, I do think it comes down to, you know, in a range of programs or in a portfolio of programs that the council may wish to pursue, what are the most cost-effective versions of that?
Okay, with an understanding that the definition of cost effectiveness needs to include some things that are going to be more subjective in terms of values, social values.
Sure, and I would just say that, you know, and one potential next step or something to consider could be where you get to first, right? Where to, in order to move forward on aggressive electrification goals, there needs to be high community confidence in not only our reliability in terms of strengthening our distribution system, but also for those catastrophic, you know, horrible emergencies that we all have, you know, in the back of our minds in terms of building comfort at moving towards all electric homes and businesses. And so, and there could be sort of a scaled, you know, small scale approach, and you know, and sometimes those are more emotional than real, but that matters when you're trying to change behavior. So that there could be
it's both emotional and real. And you know, Councilmember Philseth raised that issue last night, that we've got a tension, a real serious tension between the goals that we are pursuing in the SCAP and the needs to strengthen and harden our reliability and resiliency. And this seems like an important component that we've defined in one way up until now, and maybe needs to be modified in how we define its importance and its multiple, both needs and benefits. All right, well, thank you for all that valuable information that really informs this a lot more.
All right, one of the things we haven't spoken very much about tonight is time of use. So it was interesting in the, you know, in your discussion to see the difference between residential and commercial. I was also thinking we haven't discussed tonight, you know, one of the things that I know we've heard about at the UAC is the time shifting within like a car, right? So it's not, you could use the car as a battery at your home in terms of when you could charge it, et cetera. So that hasn't been captured in tonight's discussion, but I'm confident that staff has that on the SCAP in general. Am I right? We spend all this time talking about batteries. Am I right in reading that there are only 26 residential batteries installed and 56 in process?
As of when this report was submitted in December, that was correct.
Okay, so, all right. I don't know, it just seemed really low based on the quantity of discussion we have about this, but maybe it's just because it's a new and emerging area. So it looks like even we do this report every we do the analysis every 3 years. Is that about right? So you'd anticipate doing it again in 2023?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And then listening to the vice mayor and your, I guess I'll call it a colloquy for lack of a better word. So when I think about renewables and the utilities being early on that, am I right that so one of the ways I'm thinking about that is there's a mismatch now between supply and demand, and that's why the price is increased. Whereas the situation with batteries is really not about supply and demand, it's really more about the technology itself. Because it does seem like the price of the renewables went up and the price of the battery is going to go down. Is that what is different about this situation from the one that the vice mayor was describing?
I think the vice mayor was, and I don't mean to speak for you, vice mayor, but I think he was just saying that we really caught the right moment on the price curve for renewables. And so, we entered into contracts right as the price, was being driven down into the majority of our contracts. And that I would say that batteries are not there on the cost curve yet, and that batteries, not storage overall, but batteries, they do have a disadvantage relative to renewable generation in that they degrade by half in 10 years, right? So it's worse than solar panels, and it's worse than, wind turbines. So, there are some intrinsic chemical problems with batteries, and they're heavy. they take a lot of resources to mine them, so they're not particularly elegant, I would say, at this point. And there are other storage solutions that could get there and could come down a cost curve faster.
Okay, that's helpful. All right, that is all I had. So happy to open the floor for motions. Councilmember
Okay.
Philseth.
Move staff
Yeah,
recommendation.
go ahead.
Okay, I'll be happy to second that. Councilmember Philseth, would you like to speak to your motion?
Conventional wisdom among sort of the clean tech investor circles is that large scale storage isn't economically feasible in general till you hit around $100 a kilowatt hour or less. Doesn't sound like we're within a few years of being there. City probably shouldn't be the early adopter for this kind of stuff in a major way anyway. So I think the right thing to do is accept the staff recommendation and check in again in a few years.
Thank you, Councilmember Philseth. I'll just speak briefly to my second. As always, Dr. Perkins, I learned something every time. I learned far more about CAISO and what happened last year and how it's going to be, how they've adapted to that for this year. And I'm reassured by your discussion that there aren't any benefits from us submitting a target, and that it still gives us flexibility that we might need later. Vice Mayor, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask staff if they now have any kind of a follow-up on what potential recommendation the council would be involved in taking the basically a stronger approach to the 6 key areas that staff wants to continue to pursue, and what recommendation we would have if we wanted to endorse a greater focus on that.
You might hear children screaming in the background, so rest assured that no children were harmed during this. They're just overcoming my husband. So, you know, perhaps we might want to put more thought into sort of the rate impacts that Finance Committee would be comfortable with in terms of exploratory actions here. You know, in terms of less binding language, we could consider something like, you know, assign an aggressive value of resiliency in investigating storage and generation, in city storage and generation opportunities, you know, for the betterment of or for the strengthening of our climate goals.
So it sounds like rather than any kind of a quantitative amendment to this recommendation, it would be more a directional one, requesting staff to return with a scenario that would accelerate our evaluation of the 6 key areas with the highest value to CPAU and its customers.
If I could, Ms. Perkins, suggest, I think I'm hearing maybe there's sort of 2 tracks here. One is related to the SCAP, which, as described in the 6 key areas, is really reflects staff's current thinking about the topic and the way we would approach the ongoing work related to the sustainability plan, action plan. The other piece, so quite frankly, I think on that piece, a motion's not necessary because we're already working on that. The second piece is as it relates to direction for the next evaluation related to storage, and whether at this time it would be helpful for the Finance Committee and ultimately the Council to give direction on the parameters by which that next analysis would happen. As in, you're just kind of described a more aggressive or maybe a different weighting scheme to how that evaluation is conducted. So maybe just to with that clarification, Lena, on the second path, is there a motion there that would be helpful at this time, and invite Dean and Jonathan to chime in as well?
I'll just say that, you know, recommending that the council accept the 2020 City of Palo Alto Utilities Energy Storage Report. I would like that to be in one motion, you know, as a standalone. But, you know, if there are other motions to be considered, maybe we could keep that separate. I think I heard you, City Manager, speak to the next analyses, and you're talking in 3 years, or okay,
right, in 3 years. So I think Dr. Perkins has heard my sermon about trying to complete council actions to reflect completion of our assignments before we take on new assignments. So appreciate that, Lena.
Yeah, so I think my interest is in over the next year to accelerate this next set of evaluations and to provide the resources to do that. And it would be a separate item probably in the same motion, but there would be a clear direction to do as you asked of endorsing the staff recommendation on response to AB 2514. And then a second aspect would be to request staff to return with, maybe I'll just put this out here, request staff to return to the council with, or Finance Committee and subsequently the council with resource needs and a plan for an accelerated exploration of the 6 key areas that staff wishes to continue to explore. So I will offer that as an amendment and see whether there's a second to it.
Councilmember Filseth, once that's up there, it'll be to you to decide if you'd like to accept it.
I believe I will not accept that.
All right. I also will not accept that. Vice Mayor, would you like to continue? Are there other?
Nope. No.
All right. So with that, I believe we'll move to vote then on the main motion. And alphabetically, we'll start with.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to think procedurally. So maybe I don't want to vote against number 1, so maybe we do need to split this and go ahead and take a vote on. Well, we're not going to have something unanimous because we can't get a second. I don't know if we in Finance Committee, I guess. In a committee of 3, do we need a second to a motion?
You do. You do. So there's
Okay.
nothing to split because there's no second.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's.
You are left with the choice of whether to vote against the existing motion or to vote for it. That's correct.
Yeah, that's an interesting odd circumstance.
The Vice Mayor could propose this. He could propose a substitute motion.
You could.
Yeah, but if I can't get a second.
Potentially unlikely to get a second to that, but certainly.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get a second to that either, right? So I'm not sure what the point is. And so for this to go to the full council, what I want is the full council to be able to consider this second element. And the only way procedurally that appears to be able to do that is to vote against the primary motion, which I actually support.
Your intention is to have it be an action item?
The second element, not the first one. I want the council to be able to understand, and we can do it within a context of related matter on the agenda. I don't see an urgency to do that. We could do it when we have any other action item that is utility rate related or otherwise.
The city attorney seemed to feel that our discussion was appropriate tonight on this item, so you're certainly welcome to have it again, full council. Anything else, or shall we return to the vote?
No, I guess I just want to clarify that the only way that I can get this to the council is to have to vote against the main motion. Is that correct?
Yes, under the council's rules, if you vote no, that item would go on action. It's also possible that the committee could agree to place it on action even with a unanimous yes vote.
Okay, and I don't want to bog down the council with the first part of this.
All right, I believe I heard that city
What happens
attorney
if-
offer something elegant.
What happens if 2 of us vote no?
If 2 of you vote no to this motion, it proceeds to council with the recommendation against the staff recommendation. We'll have to, it's not necessarily the opposite of the staff recommendation. It goes on action.
Decline to decline.
Right.
Councilmember Filseth, perhaps you and I should contemplate amending this motion to send it to the action calendar. I believe we have 2 choices in front of us.
I think that ought to be unfriendly.
Okay, so that's unlikely to be accepted then. All right, so we'll return to voting on the main motion in alphabetical order. Vice Mayor Burt.
No.
I will vote yes, and Councilmember Filseth.
Yes.
All right, and that passes on a 2-1 vote. And thank you so much to staff for the time spent on this and for the time spent having that discussion this evening. One of the many areas for us to work on going forward. All right, now we move to action item number 2. Staff recommendation that the Finance Committee recommend that the City Council adopt a resolution amending utility rate schedule D1. This is for storm and surface water drainage. And it looks like Mr. Eggleston and Ms. North have magically appeared. Welcome if there's a staff presentation.
Good evening, Chair Cormack and Finance Committee. Brad Eggleston, Director of Public Works, and Karen North, Acting Assistant Director, is here to give a very, very brief presentation. I think just one slide we have to summarize this item.
Great, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if I can figure this out. Are you seeing the slide?
We are. It's sort of vertical instead of horizontal, but yes, we can see it. No worries. I mean, yes, it's fine. We can see it.
Okay. I was trying to make it so I could actually also look at another screen as well. So let's see how we do on this one. So we're here for the stormwater management fee proposed rate increase. I just wanted to remind everybody the stormwater management fee provides funding for routine stormwater system maintenance and operations that keep the city's stormwater infrastructure clean and at peak performance, and provides for stormwater system improvements that prevent street flooding. The program also provides for litter reduction, creek pollution prevention programs, commercial and residential rebates, and construction of green stormwater infrastructure projects and flooding emergency response services. We are just to remind you regarding the ballot fee measure. So in 2017, this is some of the language if we want to refer back to it. And the main reason why we're here is staff recommends that the Finance Committee recommend that Council adopt the 2% rate increase for the stormwater management fee consistent with the applicable consumer price index, increasing the monthly charge per equivalent residential unit by approximately 0.3%, 0.30 cents from 1504 to 1534 for fiscal year 22. So it's not a huge increase, but we have had ranges of increases over the years since 2017. The highest one was the CPI was at 4.5%.
And that's your slide?
That's the slide.
Thank you, Ms.
Not a whole lot in there.
All right, and now we will go to the public and see if anyone would like to provide public comment on this item.
Yes, if anyone from the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand on the Zoom app or press *9. And we have no public speakers, Chair Cormack.
Thank you so much. Turn to my colleagues for comments, questions, and motions. Councilmember Philseth.
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
Excellent. Councilmember Philseth, would you like to speak to your motion?
Looks cut and dried.
Vice Mayor Burt.
Yep.
All right. The only point I'll make is that when this comes forward to council, I anticipate there might be questions about the CPI and how it actually went up during this time frame. So I just encourage staff to be prepared to answer those. All right, then let's go ahead and vote. We'll go in alphabetical order. Vice Mayor Burt.
Yes.
I vote yes. And Councilmember Philseth.
Yes.
And that passes 3-0. Thank you very much. I think it'd be nice if we had a few more storms in this season, but we'll see. Yes, there's one small one maybe on the horizon. Okay, that brings us to action item number 3, Regional Water Quality Control Plant Wastewater Treatment Fund Capital Program Update. Mr. Eggleston is still with us, and I see Mr. Allen has joined us. Is there a staff presentation on this item?
Yes, and I'll just kick us off. So as I think you've heard over the past several years, the city's wastewater treatment plant completed a long-range facilities plan almost 10 years ago that called for a number of major projects to address new regulatory requirements and really some aging infrastructure. So with that plan, we're now reaching the point where really a number of these projects are either in process now or are planned in the coming years. And I know you've already had some discussion of the treatment plant's capital program this year as part of the wastewater rate discussions that have come to Finance Committee. But we wanted to have a separate review of the program with you on this. There's no action being requested, just a review. But we did want to provide you with some more detail and also to point out some items that will be coming to council in the near future. So I'm going to ask Jamie Allen, our plant manager, to go through the presentation he's prepared. Then, as you know, we've also got Assistant Director Cara North here, and also Carrie Del Boccio from our program management firm, which helps with the CIP at the plant to help answer questions.
Good evening, council members. My name is Jamie Allen, plant manager for the wastewater plant. Can you see the title slide?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm going to go over the agenda, project status updates, the risk that we have in delivering a capital program of this scale and scope, and our financial forecasts that are used with our partner agencies. This is the treatment plan, and the dark orange shows a lot of the facilities that are being touched in the coming years with capital projects. This is another look at it, and it's kind of like a Tetris game here with lots of different moving pieces and interdependencies, and much of the plan is being touched by the capital program with new facilities and replacement facilities. I'm going to go over the first 4 projects here in color. And then these projects down here, the advanced water purification system is in design. The headworks facility is being budgeted, and we have various smaller projects in progress, including a $6 million project to replace our 12,000 volt electrical cable and switching system around the plant. Our capital program is similar to other neighboring treatment plants. Some have larger capital programs with smaller populations. San Jose, of course, is a much larger service area with 1.4 million people. These are not exact apples to apples comparisons. They might have a 10-year or a 5-year program. San Mateo has their wastewater collection budget in here. We weren't able to exactly split these out, but they are similar enough to show you that we're all in the same boat with large capital programs, including upgrading secondary treatment. And our program that we're showing you tonight is $310 million. The first project update is primary sedimentation tank rehab. It's for older tanks. We're going to recoat them. We're going to bring you a construction contract. It was a rebid situation. Total project cost is $19.4 million. We're hoping to come to council on the 17th of May to approve partner agreements, the construction contract award, repaying the loan, and then in the future, we'd bring you a selection of a construction management firm. We'd want to start this year and finish at the end of 2023. We're not going to do any significant recoating work inside the tanks this year, but we would attempt to do 2 tanks in the dry season of 2022 and 2 more in 2023. Our new outfall line is a 63-inch new pipe, and then when that's done, we rehabilitate our existing 54-inch pipe. This allows us to address capacity leaks and sea level rise adaptation. Design is complete. We have permits in hand. We have funding we haven't locked in the interest rate, but we have our funding. But unfortunately, there's a delay as the Army Corps of Engineer levee project is being developed. The feasibility studies have shown that it's likely that our airport runway would need to shift to the south due to the levee height. Unfortunately, we don't know the exact levee height that will be constructed. And as that runway shifts to the south, it changes takeoff and landing angles, which would affect our FAA permit. And because of that, our pipe needs to be reevaluated to be deeper. And it's likely a redesign would be triggered by this reevaluation that's currently in progress. Our loan funding is still eligible with the state as long as we continue to make progress on this delay, which is about 12 to 18 months. The secondary treatment upgrade project is to address nitrogen removal for future regulations and aging infrastructure. We hope to have design done by the end of the year. And if we could get financing early, we would start construction in 2023. And with a 39-month construction project, complete construction in 2026. If we're not able to get the favorable financing this year, we'd start construction in 2024 and end in 2027. We have loan applications in progress with the EPA and the state. We would be coming back to council as early as late 2022 or early 2023 to approve loans for this project and approve a construction contract approximately 127 million and a construction management firm selection at 10% of that. The total project cost of 146 million is under review. This is a breakdown of the of that project. You go over this. It's 116 million construction, 12 million for the contingency, a program management fee estimate of 1%, a construction management fee estimate of 10%, our current design contract with Brown and Caldwell for 4.4 million, and then loan issuance costs with the US EPA WIFIA if it's needed, about 360,000 for a total project cost of 146 million. We'll be getting a new estimate later in the year when we get the final design. So for this project, we're pursuing the SRF low interest loan. It currently has a rate of 1.1%, and it's ranged between 0.9 and 1.4% in the last 2 years. And they use a competitive cut score that they announce once a year. It'll be coming out this year, end of April. And we're expecting to have a score of 12 out of 16. And next year we'd have a score of 13 out of 16 for completing our design. There's not much more, there's nothing else we can do to change our score. And then we look to see what cut score they use to pay out their overcommitted funds. And so if we can't get full funding from SRF, the US EPA WIFIA program is another option. It's co-financing. We've been invited to apply, which is almost like a guarantee that we would get this loan. It's we would have to commit to a non-refundable $250,000 application fee and lose up to $105,000 in credit rating expense. But we'll be potentially bringing this to council for approval later in the year if we need it. The rates are based on the US Treasury rates and a borrower credit rating. The SRF is not based on credit rating. It's just based on the state bond rate. Like I said, it's a co-financing option. It could even co-finance with a revenue bond. So for the estimated 146 million in principal, if we went with a 100% SRF loan, we'd have a 6 million a year debt service. And if it was co-financed, we'd have a 6.2 million a year debt service based on various assumptions on the interest rate. And so obviously we'd want to have the lower annual debt service, but this is one of the things that we're trying to work through so that we can have our financing ready when our design is ready. The environmental services and lab building, we had finished a 10% design with our consultant, and we had a sort of a mothership approach with all the staff but maintenance in this new building. But the architect came back with a construction total project estimate of 57 million, which was much greater than anticipated in the long range facilities plan. So we released the architect from the design work, but we were able to use that work for future evaluations. So we restarting advanced planning, looking at smaller buildings, including a 1-story lab only building, a 2-story tech services building, and offsite buildings, including procurement and lease options. Also looking at remodeling older on-site buildings. Now I'm switched to the capital program delivery risk. The technical and logistical risk, including this as being a 24/7 operation, doing this kind of capital program involves a lot of bypass operations and complexity. We have limited staging areas for our contractors. Schedule and sequence risk. I don't expect you to remember all these project names, but we have to do A before B before C, especially when it comes to our electrical upgrades. Things have to be in place before the next project is able to go online. The advanced water purification system needs an odor control system relocated so that we don't have a 4-year construction period instead of say a 2-year period. So these kind of phasing things have to be thought out and to be strategic. Coordination risk, typical of any complex project, include communication failures, staffing challenges, the time it takes to solicit for contracts and amend contracts, getting partners to approve at the right time with the right financial cost estimates, and then new regulations, including some recent ones from the Air District. Financial risk, one of the ones that have been identified recently is cash flow. We have $15 million in cash in the wastewater treatment fund, which has been typically in past projects been fine to pay contractors. And the way the state and EPA loans work is on a reimbursement basis. So we pay the contractor and then submit for reimbursement for the loan proceeds. And while we're waiting, we need to cover that cash. But on a project as large as 146 million, even over 39 months, there may be some months where the wastewater treatment fund cash balance is impacted. So we're looking at that. Our consultant Carrie is here tonight. If you have questions on this, looking at how projects or different other projects might impact this cash balance as well and what we can do. Other financial risks include timing issues to secure financing, the way the state loan program works. If you're not quite ready, you lose a full year. Scope changes and cost estimating uncertainties. As we get new cost estimates from consultants, we have to evaluate those and make sure the amounts that we're putting in our loan applications are correct. Our partner agreements, the budgeted amounts that you see in May and June are not going to match up exactly with what the latest cost estimates that we've received, because we're still evaluating those cost estimates. And then getting partner agencies the right forecast on a periodic basis. And when we get a new cost estimate on a large project, we need to look at being conservative for them so they don't have surprises. And so that we have to, make sure that they have the information that they need, including our own Palo Alto wastewater collection utility. And this is an example of our recent forecast. And you can see here, I'm not sure how good the resolution is, but the dark blue on the bottom is our operations budget. This lighter blue is our recurring ongoing capital projects that's funded on a pay-as-you-go basis. The dark orange here underneath the blue line is our existing debt. We have some debt retiring between here and here, it changes it slightly. And then the planned debt for these low interest loans and some revenue bonds is in the yellow up above. And you can see the big jump is for that $146 million secondary treatment upgrades, which hits in fiscal year 27. And if we don't get the SRF on the SRF funding list this year, this big jump moves to fiscal year 28. So that does provide us some time to prepare, but it is a large jump. And then this total dollar amount gets added or gets split between the 6 partners, and Palo Alto shares this total amount is, for the capital portions, 38.16%, and the blue bar is kind of based on flow share. It's been around 35% for Palo Alto. And these forecasts then get shared, and each agency works out how they work on their rates. And this is another way of looking at that table, or take that figure and put it into a table. In the next 6 months, these are the council actions that will be coming to you. Approved construction management firms for capital projects. We're hoping to have that to you in May. As I mentioned, the primary sedimentation tank rehab project, the numerous items on that. Also, May 17th is the estimated date. And then if we decide to go for this US EPA WIFIA loans, these non-refundable application fees to pay for the underwriting. Construction contract award for the 12 kV medium voltage project. And then the outfall pipeline, the likely redesign that's needed to make the pipe deeper to deal with the runway shift at the airport. And we don't have a timeline on that. So that's my presentation.
Great.
If you have any questions.
Thanks so much, Mr. Allen. We'll go to the public and see if anyone would like to make public comment on this item number 3.
Yes, if anyone from the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or press star 9. And we have no speakers, Chair Cormack.
Thank you to the clerk. All right, I will turn to my colleagues and see who has questions or comments. I understood from Mr. Eggleston, there's no need for a motion tonight. Vice Mayor Burt.
I'll go first. Have a few technical ones and then a few financial ones. So on the technical side, on the program to resulting in reduced nitrogen emissions, is that the reason for that? Is that primarily to reduce nitrous oxide? Or are there other nitrogen forms that are the objective?
The form of nitrogen that is going to be reduced is nitrate, NO3, and it'll be reduced to nitrogen gas. So we will bring that down to by 2/3.
And do we have nitrous oxide emissions that would correspondingly be reduced, or is that completely independent?
I don't think we've ever measured nitrous oxide. I don't think it's at a very high level, and that's a greenhouse gas, correct?
Right.
That's what you're concerned about. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of nitrous oxide coming off of our aeration tanks.
Oh, interesting.
I think there are some best practices for minimizing formation of nitrous oxide, which, as we know, has a very high global warming potential. Like Jamie said, I don't believe we've measured it, but it is one of the things that we look at and try to quantify, and becomes part of that greenhouse gas inventory every year that we just talked about last night.
Yeah, because I know it is recognized as a wastewater treatment byproduct, but maybe our particular process minimizes that. Okay.
We'll definitely talk to our consultant, make sure that the technologies they're using are not creating that, and that as we're reducing nitrate, to reduce nitrogen, we don't want to create some new problem, obviously. So we'll make sure they're not doing that.
At a high level, my understanding is that if we're addressing reducing nitrogen, then we would have a corresponding reduction in the various forms of nitrogen,
right?
Including non-GHG forms like nitrous dioxide and nitric oxide too. So you've got a big logistical problem as you are moving these chairs around to try and do your construction. Has there ever been any consideration of the plant taking over I'll call it the eastern portion of Embarcadero Way and expanding in that dead end street that basically is city-owned property and is not used for vehicular traffic, as far as I know?
The eastern portion of Embarcadero Way.
So toward toward what was the dump site? The dead end of Embarcadero Way, right outside your plant.
Jamie, that's the area that we're looking potentially to put the new environmental services building.
This area right here is scheduled for a staff building.
Yeah, but I mean actually taking over the street. It's not a great
the trail that heads out this area along the road, service road.
So it's a dead end street, then it becomes a trail. And so I'm referring to the non-park dedicated land that is the street that is dead end, that isn't utilized for any productive purpose as far as I know.
Yeah, we'd have to buy that from the general fund and have it undedicated as parkland because it's outside the plant property.
Well, I don't think it's parkland, it's a street.
You're saying this area can you see my cursor, this area here?
Yeah, I think that's roughly it. You know, there's a buttress and then it turns into the gravel pathway, or but the actual
it is being used as the entrance to the household hazardous waste event. It was extended a bit, so it used to end right here, or excuse me, right about here, and then it was extended a little bit to create a driveway for the HHW event, and the service road extends on. But we have not looked at using that. But if it's not parkland and the city didn't want to extend Embarcadero Way, I suppose it could be used.
Yeah, we'll never extend it. So is just one of those places where maybe there's some land to be had, and I know you need it. Okay.
Yeah, we do. Maybe we could rent it for staging area or something.
There you go. And then a question on the outfall line, which I saw. It's not only the age of the line, but having issues with capacity. So what's our trend on volume of outflow, both from resulting from conservation measures and then our recycling and our advanced recycling projection? Does that diminish the need for expanding the capacity of that line?
The recycling, no, because most of the high flow events occur during the winter time when there's very little demand for recycled water. The lower flows recently due to droughts have helped avoid high flow situations, but those will come back. And the sea level rise, the 3-foot sea level rise, puts more and more pressure on this pipe. And it was the current 54-inch pipe doesn't actually have the capacity to carry 80 million gallons a day, which we did have during the February 1998 storm. So if there was the right king tide during a high weather event, we're gambling every year that this thing isn't in place, and not trying to fear monger or anything, but it's just one of those things with sea level rise combined with a potential king tide and a potential high flow event. The reduction in the daily flow and the dry season flow does help reduce that risk, and so I'm not I'm happy for that. But
No,
this is still needed.
Well, overall, you know, I really support the need to be moving forward with this big project. And now that you've got so many components of it moving forward, another question, and it was alluded to in the staff report, which is, you know, a lot of this is being handled by consultants and construction managers and then the contractors themselves, but there's a certain amount that is your own engineering and other finance and other staff. Are we staffed well enough to be able to really address this volume of construction and upgrades and replacements in a moderately short period of time?
I think I'll speak to that. And it's interesting, Vice Mayor, that you bring that up. We've been thinking a lot about this very recently with these projects kind of ramping up, and seeing that the schedules for them are almost on top of each other, and just all those challenges that Jamie just mentioned. So very recently, we actually formed a cross-departmental team that's focused really on helping review some of these same issues and risks that Jamie was mentioning, and helping lead the coordination that's needed internally and with our consultant staff. So we've got public works staff, obviously, utility staff who are mostly involved because of the rate impacts and planning for the wastewater collection fund, administrative services staff who are looking at the budget issues, the accounting issues, the finance issues, part like cash flow, for instance, that Jamie was talking about, as well as the attorney's office and city manager's office. And actually what you just mentioned, that right balance of city staff and consultants, construction managers, program managers, that's part of what this group plans to talk about and review.
Okay, so it sounds like it is a concern of yours, which to me seems very reasonable. You've got some huge projects, and as good as you might have those construction managers, there's a whole series of internal roles as you described, and I want to make sure that we are not caught off guard that way. I remember when we had the library, we hadn't done a major project in decades, and we just didn't have the internal staffing that we might have desired. And now we've progressed on that with a larger capital plan on a lot of the other areas, although that must still be stressing the system. And then you layer this on top. And so I want to really encourage you to not be shy about coming forward. And frankly, that goes back into the last thing, which is related to the rates that we're charging and whether we're front loading this capital project enough. As Jamie mentioned, we have certain cash flow needs, and you're examining whether there's enough of a cushion in that capital project. On top of that, when we look at the expense graph and the increases in the capital fund, we have some real abrupt jumps. And given that we have at a couple of front-end potential needs to have adequate cash flow and to have adequate staffing, I really wonder whether we are delaying our cost increases, not just to ourselves, but to our member partners who pay actually the bulk of this, and stressing our system and in any way jeopardizing the degree to which we can do this smoothly from cash flow and a management standpoint and all the other necessary resources. So that all leads to the question of, should we be looking at our immediate rate changes to have a modest leveling of that front loads this a bit more? So that's a question.
Yes, and we don't have, I don't think we have with us tonight the utilities staff who work on rates. I do know we've been having a lot of conversations and providing these forecasts, and there have been discussions about how do we look at rate increases in the nearer term to, Jamie's chart, I think, showed one particular year where we had an 18% increase in the wastewater treatment fund. So obviously we want to be looking at addressing those sorts of increases.
If I might add, Director Eggleston, I think you're being too modest. So let's do a little more elaboration on the homework the staff has been doing. If you could perhaps expand a bit, and I'll ask Interim Assistant City Manager Nose to also chime in with some of the interagency consultation you've been doing, as well as some of the issues that you've been discussing, such as insurance, safety programs, consultant roles, and the appropriate complement of all of the above. Please, don't be modest.
All right, I'll try. So as Jamie discussed, we're not the only plant that is going through this. So leveraging our network and looking at, frankly, our partners in other agencies that are perhaps a little bit further along in this, we have reached out to other staff members who have run their plants simultaneously as well, trying to do this in place. And you're correct. They all have said it's no small feat. There are risks. And so basically some of those risks are what we've identified: multiple contractors, who's responsible, the internal staffing, and having that kind of teamwork. And so that's why we've created this central team to really make sure that we have a hub to work through these issues and raise them as they arise, frankly, as opposed to, letting something break and then fall. And so we are looking at, just like Director Eggleston said, the mix of how much consultants, how many consultants, should we do blanket insurance? There's a different word for it. And is that penny wise, pound foolish?
Owner-controlled insurance program.
Thank you. Owner-controlled insurance program. Some agencies have found it ending up not being helpful. Other agencies have found it being helpful. So kind of teasing through these different risk factors associated is the intent of both the outreach to our neighboring jurisdictions, frankly, as well as creating this internal team to maintain, frankly, routine oversight of this. I can just say from my own perspective, from the ASD side, this hits my accounting team, this hits our procurement team, this hits our budget team, this hits our treasury team of one that has now done already more debt issuances in the last year than I think this organization has done in, I don't know, a decade. And obviously the disclosures and Emma postings associated with that. On the rate side of things, I will say each individual agency, partner agency, is responsible for establishing their own rates to their customers. So I do believe that different agencies within our partners are at different points in terms of adjusting their rates for these improvements. Jamie and his team has provided these 10-year forecasts to the partner agencies, and each partner agency knows what's coming and will be anticipating that accordingly, per their own, policy direction from their elected officials. The one thing I will say is at the end of the day, the financing structure and our agreements with those partner agencies and them being in alignment with each other will be very much necessary. And in the event different agencies want different structures, that will be wildly complex and increase both the risk as well as the staffing need, frankly, to oversee something that complex. So I would say there's the internal controls that we're trying to deal with and working with collaborating with other agencies. And then there is the partner side of it that we've got as well. So to city manager and Director Eggleston, I think that's a high level look at kind of where we're headed.
Is the takeaway then that even if we at this point in time had a reconsideration and said, maybe we're being too conservative on when we adjust our rates to be able to respond to the front end needs of this massive project from a funding standpoint, it would be complex to try to have Palo Alto adjust our rates immediately. And it has to be done in concert with those other partners. Is that correct?
I don't think the
no.
rates have to be done with the other partners, no.
Costs, the allocation of costs and expectations for cash flow. This is actually the source of litigation between San Jose and its what they call tributary agencies. So the costs of the capital program and how those are allocated among the agencies.
So are you comfortable that our current and next rate increases are adequate to meet your cash flow needs and your staffing needs to make sure that we're adequately funded for both those?
The utilities department is for the wastewater collection rates has those forecasts and is building that into their planning. I don't believe we've given them any forecasts that show increases in staffing costs. As we were saying, that's something we do want to consider. I would anticipate those sorts of increases to be relatively minimal, though, in the scheme of these other increases.
And same thing with the cash flow. Have you guys, rather than kind of be worried that you don't have enough cash flow, if the council says, just make sure you're in good shape, would you do anything differently?
I think we need to research that more because the cash flow is not just an us cash flow. And I think we wouldn't want to artificially increase our Palo Alto rates to subsidize the cash flow for other agencies. So that gets into how is the debt structured? How are the financial obligations structured between us and the partner agencies and between us and the financing agency, whether it's the state, the feds, or the open market, so that we can adjust for that timing. Obviously, we have some flex, right, with the 15 million from that perspective. And there's a few years and we have some time before we hit those years where we'll probably be stretched and need to make sure that we have kind of lined all of those components up to account for those.
Well, I'll be interested to hear my colleagues' thoughts on this, but mine would be that please don't be overly cautious and place us in any kind of a jeopardy because you were wanting to try to really minimize rates at the expense of the project.
Vice Mayor, I'd just say, really appreciate that feedback. And I just want to add, I do have a lot of confidence in our team, both Public Works and across the organization working on this. And as something that I've worked on for 10 years, it's really exciting to be at this point.
Yep, we want to help you make it happen. Thanks.
Councilmember Philseth.
Yeah, thanks very much. Well, I think the Vice Mayor sort of drilled in to the right place on this. I guess I'll ask what's probably redundant at this point and much less incisive and much more touchy-feely, but it's a fairly sizable project we're looking at here. In general, in the long term, you guys feel like we're keeping on track. We're not falling behind on capital on the wastewater stuff. That is, you feel like we're not going to get out 20 years from now and say, oh my gosh, we should have done that thing back in 2024, right? So if you looked at a 100-year view of what we're spending on capital versus what we need, are we sort of on the curve? You guys feel confident about that?
Go ahead, Brad.
Well, as a first crack, I'll just say that most of this treatment plant was built in around 1970.
Yeah,
and
I mean, we're talking long-term stuff.
Doing kind of minor maintenance with certain upgrades along the way. Now we're here at this point of actually rebuilding a lot of it.
Right.
So I feel like we're going to be in a really good place in, I don't know, 10 years,
yeah,
maybe sooner. What would you add, Jamie?
I feel that after we get through this bevy of projects that we have before you, that there's not as many large capital projects after that. We'll be in much better shape. Our filter facility needs a potential overhaul. And then the large diameter pipelines that are below ground that we've never really been able to assess well. You kind of worry about those. Sunnyvale had a problem with one of their pipes that they were scheduled to replace, and it broke and leaked partially treated sewage into the bay. We have to, do a focused look at those. They're large steel pipes, 72-inch diameter, 60-inch diameter, mortar lined and coated, and you don't know what the groundwater is exactly doing to the steel behind that mortar coating. So that's something that we worry about a little bit. But those, Hetch Hetchy is built with the same material, and that thing has been in service since what, like 1909 or something. And so it can last 100 years if it's in the right condition.
Yeah.
There was a recent example. Let me ask Director Eggleston or Mr. Allen to remind us of the change that was made recently to Councilmember Philseth's point on ensuring that we're keeping up with current state of practice on processing technologies and approaches.
Yeah, and Jamie, maybe you can add on, but council members may remember we brought a contract amendment for the giant secondary treatment upgrades project to you. I think it was late last calendar year, where kind of after we had started design, we had done some analysis and determined there was a newer technology for that nitrogen removal process that we wanted to employ. So that was a process that, just an example of kind of things evolving and being flexible. We had to make a change to the design basis and had some schedule impacts and budget impacts as well, but using newer technology, and we think we'll be in a better place in the end.
And for what
was
it's
the
worth,
name of that technology, Jamie?
Interesting point.
Go ahead.
The interesting point is there's a risk of doing stuff too soon too.
well, and to the earlier discussion of the appropriate composition of in-house staff with consultant on the design program, as well as, or the design project, as well as the overall program, really leveraging our checks and balances among the individual interests to ensure that we were meeting the city's best interests in comparing the recommendations from the design consultant, using our other program management consultant and the in-house expertise. So I really do think that that was a good example of leveraging the roles and, again, a bit of checks and balances to ensure we're serving the community's needs.
I had one other question, which is sort of as you were speaking, sort of jumped out at me, which is, we got sea level rise. And that means we're going to need to do a bunch of work on levees. And in response, the airport's going to have to move a runway. And in response to that, we're going to have to do some pipe work, right, for the wastewater treatment plant. So the airport's supposed to be expense neutral. Sounds like a hidden cost of the airport. Right? Is that a big one? And are there a lot of those?
Are you talking?
That's an airport cost that's going to go on the water treatment utility bills.
The cost of making changes to the pipeline design, Councilmember,
in order to accommodate the airport.
No, we're going to accommodate their runway shift. We're going to make our pipe deeper.
Right.
We're going to meet with the Palo Alto pilot users group and make sure they're happy. And we're making our pipe deeper to be underneath the grade of their runway.
That's the point. Okay.
If we're paying for that,
we wouldn't be doing that.
Right. If the airport wasn't there and the runway didn't need to shift, so that outfall pipeline project will get more expensive.
Right.
And we'll have to modify that loan amount with the state.
But the airport's supposed to be revenue expense neutral.
Yes.
Well, there's a debate between enterprise funds on that one, as far as who's the impact and who has to mitigate it.
Even in
but the airport, that's true. Okay. But
our pipe has to last 30 years. We don't.
Most of it comes from the FAA. Okay, not Palo Alto ratepayers.
Right. Well, we've got close to $40 million in grants from the FAA for making capital improvements at the airport.
Okay.
And those grants do come with these grant assurances that stop us from doing things like making changes to the property that could interfere with the airspace.
Yeah.
So, but your point is well taken.
FAA got another $4 million for this pipe project. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Councilmember Philsett. Covered a lot of ground already. I just want to take a moment. I know Councilmember Philsett talks about what the people in Palo Alto really want, and they want us to take care of this stuff that they don't have the time or energy to think about. And I think this is the ultimate utility that most people don't want to think about. But I've just been, thinking, reflecting on, this is actually the original public health measure, and we probably don't thank you enough for managing for this for all of us on a 24/7 basis. So the more time I know that I spend on understanding all the different parts of it and what could go wrong when, the more grateful I am that our staff spends all of their time focused on this. So I just wanted to start with that at a high level. I think the next time we see this or you present it, this was a super helpful overview. Having the sequence and schedule sort of blocked out across the years, it was a little hard to match which project, which year, construction, map that from the map to the, anyway. So that just might be helpful from a timeline standpoint. Sometimes in the same way we do the finances, that way we'd be able to see it, just help us appreciate, which I think we all do, that there's a lot of moving pieces and parts at the same time. Go ahead, Mr. Allen.
We have that. Carrie, I don't know if you want to see it now. We can bring that next time. Carrie Del Baccio might be able to pull something up.
Next time's fine. I don't think
it gets really complicated. I was trying to show you when the debt starts, that when the money has to be triggered rather than start of construction, end of construction. But
and
Carrie,
totally appropriate. Yeah, no need to show us anymore at this point. I think we've got lots of information.
Okay.
But, just next time as an overview, I think just be helpful.
We'll do that.
Yeah. And we touched on the cash flow. It was helpful to see on your chart the debt to annual expenditure budget ratios. I'm guessing because this is a proverbial lumpy thing, there aren't best practices on that, but does staff have any comments they want to make on where we think these should be? I mean, we think so much about reserve levels. Any thoughts on those percentages and how we should be thinking about them?
Kylie, did you want to answer this one?
Sure. Councilmember Cormac, you are right. Those percentages are high for our policies and our practices. However, a few years ago, the team did a study of what all of the plants are looking like. And given how infrequent these investments happen, but how large they are, you're hard pressed to be able to maintain typical debt to expense ratios as you're going through this update. So the ratios that are proposed and outlined in the forecast are currently, I would say, comparable with other agencies going through similar upgrade processes.
Okay, great. That's helpful. It looks like the loan repayment terms are 30 years, but I'm hearing maybe the lifetime, wow. This is what happens when we schedule these during dinner. Okay, the life of the asset is probably more like 50 years. Usually we try to match those things. Any thoughts on that? I mean, it's not that we want a longer loan. I'm just trying to understand. We actually probably did. We did exactly the same thing with the library, right? Those have lasted 50 years. We did a 30-year bond. We expect them to last 50 years. Anything we should think about there in terms of matching those? Sorry, my dog.
Carrie, did you want to answer that?
Sure. Yeah. So the loan terms are actually standard for those state and federal loan programs. It's not like getting a municipal bond where you negotiate that term. It's a standard 30-year term from the state revolving fund loan. And the main thing you have to show them is that your asset is going to last for at least the 30 years that you're still paying the bills on it. As the WIFIA program does have an option to have a slightly longer term going up to 35 years. And that is something we're exploring if we go down that pathway. And does that provide us some advantage? Obviously comes with more interest, but it is an option. But neither of those programs, I believe, offer anything more than 30 or 35 year.
Okay, so that sort of gets at the timing of this, which the Vice Mayor was talking about earlier. You can see where the surges would be. And then my last question. Well, thanks, Mr. Allen, for giving me yet something else to worry about, like 80 million gallons a day, 1998 king tide, like, oof, those of us on the JPA, we worry about it every month as it is. I'm like, I'm going to add that to my worry list. And Mr. Director Eggleston knows that that's not a good place to be, but I'll let you worry about it. The last question would be about the percentage allocations among the partners. That sounds like something that's, and certainly it's been, I think we had a item on it recently where it was reviewed and appropriate. I think it was an audit of them that we all approved. As we do this going forward, are we using forward-looking volumes to do this analysis? Just give us the high-level summary of how the allocations for partners will look moving forward. Because I can imagine our different partners having different growth rates or changes in their environment.
Our fixed capacity as Palo Alto is 38.16%, and our most recent operating share was 35%, but it's been 35 to 40%. So it kind of bounces around that 38%, depending on the level of growth and water conservation and drought. The 35% last year had a few pandemic months as well, so that's not actually typical. So it's the fixed capacity share for the debt is very similar to the operating share, and no one has ever wanted to really change theirs. They want to be able to grow within that range and keep that share in the plant's physical capacity.
Okay, so we're planning to use the current numbers for future allocations.
Right, we would continue using this. No one has asked for a different share in the plant.
Okay, great.
Can I just make sure that we're all clear that those are current numbers for shares of plant capacity, as opposed to current numbers of actual like flow rates into the plant.
Okay, got it. It's like the ISG on the water side. Okay, great. That concludes my my questions. Was there anything staff wanted to add that we haven't touched on in this wide-ranging discussion? It's important for us to know.
Nothing's coming to mind from me. I think this was a really good discussion and we appreciate it.
Oh, I neglected to say one thing, which is I appreciate staff, you know, without having to come to us, looking at the operations center and knowing that you needed to do it differently. So I'm sorry. I know the staff out there had really been looking forward to having an integrated operations service center, and I visited the lab, and it really needs to be fixed. But obviously now more than ever, I think the right thing to do is to stop that and figure out another way to approach it. All right, do either of my colleagues have any last points on this item? Seeing none, we'll move to,
Councilmember Cormack?
yeah,
Sorry,
certainly.
if I can just, if there's one message just for everyone to take away from this, I think, just as a kind of finality to staff's discussion or the discussion with the committee is recognition that this is an evolving picture. And so, you know, we are stepping through this, you know, day by day, year by year, and the plants team has done significant work thus far to get us to this point. But we are at an inflection point, I would argue, where the span and scope of this is going to expand as we deal with these complexities as they're more eminent. This is no longer a plan. This is we're out to bid for this project. We're looking at the contracts. We're looking at the loans and hitting the crest, I would say, as we approach the crest of that. You saw the 10 or 20 year forecast. So I would expect that things to evolve and change. And if there's one thing I took away from talking with the other agencies is when you're rebuilding a plant that's this old, while it's working, you never know what you're going to find. And so plan for the unknown. And we can put our best laid plans out there, but something's going to break. Just like we were talking about in Sunnyvale, something's going to happen that we didn't expect. We're going to have to shift the structure of the projects. Maybe one moves up and another one moves back, because we have to make sure we're adjusting and adapting as, frankly, the infrastructure allows and requires us to, as the team is moving through this. So I guess if there's one thing I can impart on this committee is, like, buckle up, because this is going to be bumpy as we move through this. And so, us as a staff will do our best, obviously, to communicate the hurdles, the pitfalls, and know that we're on top of that. But this will have hiccups, guaranteed, as we move through.
That's a helpful reminder, Ms. Nosey. And since you mentioned 10 years, I realized something else I wanted to mention is I've been reflecting for some time that I think we would be better served with our capital infrastructure plan by looking at 10 years instead of 5 years, not just in wastewater, but across the board. So I'll leave that in your capable hands. And now we will move on to future meetings and agendas, which I imagine is just one big word that says budget, but okay. We reviewed that, I think, quite recently, just 2 weeks ago.
We did. So
yeah.
I figured.
Don't need to put that slide up again.
Yes.
Spend a lot of quality time with the budget, and we're going to take a nice break for lunch so everybody has time to eat and check their email.
That is correct. So to that point, Chair Cormack, our next meeting will be at 2 p.m. on May 4th, where we will discuss, we're expecting to go over Junior Museum and Zoo fee structure and program, another kind of deep dive like this one prior to getting into the nuts and bolts of the budget. And we'll also have a high level discussion. It'll be a verbal report to the committee on the budget, since the budgets will be released by that May 4th. And then after that, it's full steam ahead in May, the 11th, the 12th, and the 25th to get through review of the 2022 proposed budget, operating and capital.
Perhaps we should set ourselves a goal of having fewer hours on Zoom than we had last year. I think that's a goal we might be able to meet with this year's budget. All right.
Calculation.
With that, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Good night.